Good morning. I'm Zach Jackson. He's Andre Knott. This is the A to Z Podcast. Facebook.com/A to Z Podcast. A to Z Podcast.com. The purple podcast button on your fancy iPhone. Shout outs as always to Scene, to the Honeymoon Grill, to American Fireworks for helping to make this thing happen, to you guys for helping it grow. Disclaimers. We get excited. We venture into mature/immature subjects and sometimes say 4-letter words or 7-letter words that you don't normally hear on your radio.
7-letter words are much better.
Yeah, so if that's the case, if you're in a work environment, if there are kids around, if you're easily offended, this isn't the podcast for you, or just put on your earbuds and enjoy the sweet sounds. My friend, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. How's the Christmas shopping coming?
It's pretty good for the most part. I'm actually jumping over to the other side and being willing to buy things off online. I hope a cool gift for my dad that this photographer that takes pictures of drag racing or whatever, and I follow him on Instagram. Something my dad would never understand. I tried to give him an Instagram account 3 years ago in spring training, and he still can't figure out his passcode and knows what it is. Because just said I was going to give him, he's into drag racing. So like cars are his thing. So this photographer, and my dad does these traveling shows with, muscle cars and stuff. So I found a photographer that he liked that I follow on Instagram that does these big prints. And I actually took advantage of it, ordered something for my dad, and then I realized it was sitting on the kitchen table as my dad was at my house all day yesterday, and I was like, shit, if he sees this, not that he would have any idea what it was, but it just, you have that initial freak out of,
yeah.
It's still boxed, but I'm like, I just gave it away. The other hard part for me, getting stuff with the kids for their mom and for their grandparents without the kids telling them what it is.
Right. Because your kids are at the age where they repeat everything. Yes.
Everything. Exactly. Otherwise, yeah, it's good. But, yeah, they repeat things like it's nobody's business. I'm like, dude, why'd you just say that? Like, my mom is over yesterday. He's like, Gigi, your present is right under the tree. It's a nice necklace. And we're just like,
Mommy, Dad said motherfucker.
Right. That ain't coming yet. It's coming. And that was the best story. My dad was over all day yesterday watching football, and we did our late Thanksgiving with like family and friends that weren't able to do it because we were in Chicago. So we had a great meal. Yesterday was awesome. We had a great meal. My dad is great because he tells me, he's like, you gonna set up both TVs? And I was like, yeah, I think so. I go, Bella's been sick, but I go, I think so. He goes, all right, I'll probably come over about halftime of the 1 o'clock games. And lo and behold, in true Andre Knott Senior fashion, 1:15. And who is it but my dad with a ham, who he told my wife, because he's like, I'll cook the ham. I'll have the ham ready. Instead, he shows up with a honey-baked ham, uncooked, and goes, hey, here's what I'm bringing for Thanksgiving. You got the games on? And just flops down. And drinks Miller Lite until like 10 o'clock at night. It was like having you over. Just my dad. With a 12-pack of fucking ham, and then they don't leave. Oh, he had 3 square meals. He had the best time of his life.
He clocked in and clocked out. He put in a whole day over at your house.
Yeah, it was like halftime of the Sunday night game, and I was like, man, I got to clean some of these dishes. He goes, well, that's my sign. I'm like, okay, thanks, Dick. You've been here all day. You made everything dirty. I start cleaning up. He's like, all right, gotta go.
So to go back to trying to get him on Instagram, speaking of dads and technology, my dad now listens to the podcast. So,
oh, snap.
Yeah, so he knew about it before, and I think there are times my mom made him listen, but really up until a year ago, or hell, probably 7 or 8 months ago, she would listen on their old desktop computer, which is like from the mid-'90s, because that's just where she knew how to listen, right? And it'd be hilarious because she'd be on her MacBook, which is worth more than my car, working, but she knew how to play the podcast from there. So, but my dad,
it's amazing.
Well, my dad recently, like, I don't know, at this time of year, I mean, I have no short-term memory anyway, but at football season, I really don't know the difference between 3 days, 3 weeks, and 3 months. He got the first new car of his life, like brand new. So it came with Bluetooth and everything and technology. And so now when they go on these long trips to my brother's games, they listen to podcasts. And they listen to some old people shows. But my mom tells me that they listen to this, which is not just a young person show. It's not just an old person show. We're here for everybody, including my parents.
Everybody. What up, Reg? What up, Reg? You keep cussing at your boys' games. I got you. They kick you out. I'll come pick you up.
So speaking of that, two things. I cannot read on the air for the sake of many people what my dad texted to my brother yesterday after his game on Saturday. I cannot read that, but
damn,
I can tell you that I was neither at the game nor was I watching on the stream because of I had prior plans. But I had a friend who was watching on the stream send me 4 texts during the game. One of them was an update on the 3 that sent the game into overtime, and the other 3 were things that my dad was screaming at the officials during the game coming across the TV.
I might come to a game. I might come to a game not even to have Brody's back, but just to sit with Reg.
So to sum up these podcast adventures, and I encourage you all to stream the Pitt Greensburg basketball games, not just to hear my dad, but when he first got this and he realized he could have I think it's Pandora, maybe it's Spotify, I don't know, and he was spending hours figuring it out, how to customize it and custom tune it and link it to his phone and all of these things. My mom told me she got in the car one time and started playing with the buttons on the radio, and you build different lists on those, and he had one list that was in all caps, "She's in car," which was a sign that he listens to a little different when she's not in car.
Oh, shit. She's in car. That might be the best list ever. Oh, Reg. Oh, that just made my entire week. She's in car.
Well, you think about it was just,
so good.
It was just 20 years ago when my friends' moms were finding their Tupac CDs, right, and splitting them in half.
Right.
And now my dad going on... Going on 67 years old has a list for when my mom's in the car and when she's not.
Well, the other thing you just brought up from this, which is great, is how our parents, because I saw this fight online about when millennials start, and I think you and I are like right before the beginning of millennials. Pretty obvious in how we live, but it was talking about like all the different things because we're right at that cusp. All the different things like some dude was like, man, if you went to high school with a cell phone, you're a millennial. And I was like, well, I didn't. But you talk about those PCs, those personal computers everybody had.
Yeah.
Like I was at my in-laws' house a few weeks back, and I remember looking at it. It still sits in the same corner. I know my parents have them. I'm sure your parents have them. And all I can think is, man, if anybody really went through those old PCs and saw what their kids who are now adults, what they really looked at back in the day when mom and dad went to bed. Like those, I know what happened on that with the one we had at our house. I can only imagine just because our parents didn't know, they used it for email, and now it's amazing. And like you said, my mom is like your mom. She's got all kinds of different MacBooks and this and that, but the PC's still around. And I'm always like, somebody needs to torch that thing, just because it needs to be torched. And I think most people listening to this podcast understand when they go home for Christmas break or you go see your parents, you go over your grandmother's over the next 3 to 4 weeks, you're going to look at that PC and think, I may not have looked at anything that I shouldn't have looked at, but I know one of my cousins or brothers or sisters did.
I was there one time when my dad found something of my brother's that he probably shouldn't have had on the family computer. Boy, was that an experience. Right. And I kept thinking, man, somebody's Christmas is going to be ruined because of one of them PCs. Well, of course, because Brody's a fucking chosen one. He never got in trouble. But it went from my dad clicking on, what is this? Ooh, this isn't good. And then he just chose the strategy of continuing to click.
Oh, no. Damn, Red. Not for her.
Let's just say that folder was the same picture from different angles. So congrats to you, Brody.
Hey, you got to run. If you're going to run the play, you got to know how it works from every angle, right, bro? How is Mr. Jackson doing? Do we got to send a U-Haul for him after the season yet?
No, they're on to their break. They have semester exams, and then in D3 you only get a handful of non-conference games, so they don't play for about 3 weeks. And the next one they actually play in Northeast Ohio, their next game a few days after Christmas. Kenyon? No.
So that's
Oberlin. Sorry. Yeah, so it's not too far out there.
Oberlin. Yeah, Thursday night. I'll probably got to see. Damn.
I don't know what night it is. I think it's a Friday, Jerry. I'll have to check it out. I'll have to check out the exact date.
If it's a Friday, it's in. I'm definitely in. Seriously,
Yeah,
I'm coming and we're bringing it.
We'll have to figure that out. But yes, so my mom was giving me text updates. My friend was giving me text updates, and then off the air, I'll share what Reg had to say to Brody about the course of the season. But you know what?
Yeah.
It's a long season, and we just want the Bobcats to just show up and play hard. That's all we want, right?
Show up and show out. It's all it's show up and show out. You know what that is, Brody. Let me ask you this. Obviously, this is one of the better December 10ths we've had in a while when it comes to the Cleveland Browns football. Hell, in over a decade, when you consider the record. And it is amazing. And I'm being fair and pointing it. I enjoyed the game thoroughly. I'm not, for once, let's just talk about a game and not talk about next year. I know that's hard to do. I appreciate Freddie Kitchens. I appreciate what he's done offensively. I love that he's using all of his weapons. And you know what? Kids use this as a lesson. I'm going to go against the rule I just made. But I think it's important.
You've never done that before.
Only on Mondays. No, I mean, a lot of times, I just had a kid that interviewed me, high school kid that was interviewing me about my career, how it started. And I had a conversation with him, and he texted me last night, and I appreciate him. I told him the first game I did on Brown sideline, the week before, I was sitting at Cleveland Brown Stadium. I was sitting next to Mike Snyder, who I look at as a father when it comes to radio and just my career. And we were listening to Casey Coleman. Terry Pluto was sitting like two more people down. And Snyder, who's done every job, on the planet when it comes to radio and television, that's why he's in the Cleveland Hall of Fame. He looked at me and said, Dre, I'm going to tell you now, the hardest job to do during a radio broadcast of a football game is down there what Casey's doing. He goes, that sideline job is you prepare all week long, and he goes, you just have no idea when they're going to throw it to you, how they're going to use you. Half the guys don't use you. Then they use you. They expect you to carry them. And Snyder was just saying, like, it's a hell of a job. And 6 days later, I was doing that job and had never done it before my whole life. And I remember telling this high school kid that I had two ways to go. I was either going to pee my pants and completely embarrass myself.
Shit your pants, Larry Nance.
Yes, I was going to shit my pants, Larry Nance. And I was going to have my dad send text to me like Reg sent to your brother. I don't know what he said, but I'm pretty sure Andre Sr. would say about what Reg would say. Or I was going to find a way to flourish and take advantage of the situation. And we have people say sometimes, oh, you got lucky, or oh, that was luck. Some people believe in luck, some people don't. There is something to luck, but being prepared and being ready for a situation is something different. Freddie Kitchens is doing exactly what he should be doing in this situation, because whether he comes back with the Browns or whether he's with another team, he's showing the entire NFL that he can call offensive plays for an NFL franchise. And I think that's the coolest thing is when you see someone get an opportunity that they may not have asked for, that maybe they weren't hired for, but they show that they're prepared for. There are a lot of people that get thrown in those situations and they embarrass themselves and they shit their pants, Larry Nance. I want to give a hand to Freddie Kitchens because just overall, there's little things that I pick up on. That like obviously it's easy to see the big play. You come out with a big play. Hey, look, you got a quarterback with a lot of swagger. What's the best way to let a guy's nuts hang? Because that's what Baker would want to say. You give him a play early on that he can do that. But by doing that, you can work in, we're going to establish the run. We're going to run other things. I just feel from afar I get great chemistry by this offense, and I think it starts with the guy that's calling the plays. And I'm not advocating him being the Browns guy, this guy. I just see that situation as I like seeing a guy take advantage of a situation because there's plenty of times where we see the opposite, where people don't take advantage of a situation when they get a chance.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Play calling, Dre, is like a lot of other things in life and in sports. You let your balls hang out a little bit, right? And you're a genius if it works, and you're a dumbass if it doesn't. And Freddie has gotten caught speeding a couple of times. A couple other times he's worked. And I don't care who you are. In Game 13 of an NFL season, you're showing teams formations they haven't seen. You're going to have a chance to hit them. Now you still got to execute it, right? You got to get guys in the right place. You got to call that play at the right time. You got to get the right block, and they've done that. He has mixed because it's hard to do. Anytime as a play caller, you have to mix base principles with timing, with risk management, with your own tendencies, with how you attack a defense, with your own strengths, all of these things. And he's hit some home runs, and he's certainly in the Panthers game hit some home runs. I agree. And it makes for an interesting situation here because he's proven he can be an NFL offensive coordinator. And above all else, I mean, the most exciting thing and the thing that gives you hope for the Browns is the way Baker Mayfield has played. Those two clearly have a rapport. They have the same aggressive mindset, and they appear to be building something. So I want to hold that thought for.
Let me say one thing off of that. The only reason I said I don't want to talk about jobs next year is I don't think it's fair to John Dorsey to basically do what we've always said about him and Hugh Jackson. It's not fair, even though Freddie's doing a great job, and I know it's easy fodder, and I'll probably say it again and go against the grain on this myself because I'm a human being and I can be an idiot as well. It's not fair to go for a coaching search and say, hey, I want you to run my team, but you got to have this guy be the offensive coordinator.
Well, sure.
You understand?
Yeah,
okay.
That is one of several layers to this thing. And before we dive into that, I want to piggyback on your thought and just say my hat's off to Greg Williams. He's done a great job in the circumstances. And that doesn't mean that he's perfect. That doesn't mean that he is or isn't a legitimate head coach and candidate going forward. Only John Dorsey knows that. We will see what happens. But I think Greg has taken the opportunity. I think he has toned down his act to a point. I think he has pushed the right buttons with the right players. And I think Freddie's a part of it. Obviously, Baker's probably the biggest part of it. Jarvis playing like he has, getting Joe Schobert back. You know, the guys have busted their ass for Greg. Guys have busted.
Hey, good job. Hey, good job on you by doing the Schobert thing when you did it. And I don't kiss your ass because I can't stand you. But he is a very important player on how they play defense. And I'll let you continue, but I wanted to say that when you said his name because I'm not going to say it's Luke Kuechly, and I'm not actually I hate attaching white guy to white guy. He is a very cerebral middle linebacker and plays very good football. And there is a difference when he's on the field and not on the field. When he was out for those couple of games, the defense did not play the same way. And let me say this about Greg Williams. You know, if you've listened to pod, I haven't always been a big fan. But what he's been able to do, forget what happens these next 3 games. I think he's gained a lot of respect amongst NFL people and people that knew him before this. And good for him. He's given people a different light, a different thing to think about and talk about him. Because I know there were people that were writing in local newspapers when he was fired, this guy doesn't deserve because of his past, he doesn't deserve to be a head coach. I think he's proven to the rest of the league he's more than that bombastic guy that's yelling 3, 2, 1, come get some, bitch. Yeah. He's a lot funnier when he says that to me now than maybe he was 8 weeks ago.
Well, lots of things are funner, right? When you're winning games, the jokes are funnier, the water's colder, the toilet paper's thicker, all of these things, right? And the presentation
like
matters.
Did Dick tell you that?
Presentation matters. And Greg, at least publicly, has toned it down. But privately, and I don't know the answer to this question, whatever he's done, he to challenge these guys, to push their buttons, to get them focused on the next play, on the next drive. It's worked. And I think that's permeated throughout the locker room. It's obvious the Browns are playing with a lot of energy and having a lot of fun, and that is a welcome change. One other, speaking of Joe Schobert and Luke Kuechly, this is not a diss on Joe Schobert, a guy I clearly have a lot of respect for, but nobody's Luke Kuechly. That is one bad motherfucker.
No doubt. He's bad. But that was why those, and you know this, but that's why the plays to Mr. Contagious worked. Because they're like, hey, Kuechly's so damn smart, and he calls all your plays out. We got to put a wrinkle in that he's never seen before. Like, that's the respect, and that's why Schobert isn't close to Kuechly. And I did that because that was a game we watched last night. Like, there was some linebacker play. Number one, the Browns win was awesome. I had an awesome day because I got to watch almost every single game. And that's what my dad and I laughed. He goes, for all his scoring, he goes, all we've been talking about is the linebacker play. Because in that Rams-Bears game, the Bears linebacking crew did a great job. Cowboys game against the Eagles, their 2 young linebackers did a great job. It's amazing for 12 weeks of the season, 10 weeks of the season, we talked about offense. that all of a sudden these defenses are coming around, Zach. It was fun to watch these linebackers run around and make plays yesterday.
White linebackers are back.
They are. Everybody got one. It seems. It's still a dream. It's a gleam, man.
This is, this is the discussion. It's such a week-to-week league, and we've known that for years. And it's never been highlighted more than over the past 6 weeks, where probably 8 weeks now, to be fair, where the Browns were clearly in a downward spiral. They made the change. They got overwhelmed by the Chiefs, who were really, really good. Then they played well, and everybody wanted to crown everybody. Then they didn't play well, and nobody was talking about Greg and Freddie keeping their jobs. And then they come back, and they come in a game where a Carolina team that really needs to shut Cam down. I mean, my gosh, you can't let a guy play with one arm when the one arm is not his throwing arm specifically.
Yeah, right.
But Carolina needed that game and played for 2.5 quarters like they were interested in winning that game. And the Browns' defense tightened, and they made the stops that they needed to. So Carolina had some real dumbass game management and play calling. But the Browns won that game, Dre. They answered. Yeah. They were aggressive, and the defense got shredded for a good chunk of it and answered the bell when they needed to. And you can't say enough about Baker. I mean, the throw on the deep one to Jarvis is out of this world, but the simple play to step up to be able to see it is advanced beyond his years.
I don't give props to everybody because there's so many smart asses out there, but I tweeted something, and very rarely do I tell anybody. I think Jake Burns may be the kid's name, the guy's name. I don't know if he's a kid or man. I happen to follow him. He breaks down plays. Right before the 2-minute warning, second down play. They're backed up in their own end zone. And I wanted to talk about something else. But that throw to Jarvis, phenomenal. I would never fight you upon that. But to me, the best throw that Baker made, he made a ton of them. I think it was second down, 10, 11. Roll him out in the end zone. His first 3 receivers are all covered or knocked on their ass. Chubb gets knocked down immediately. So roll out. He's in the end zone. He's patient. And he found the guy that he found for the first play. And Perriman has worked great so far. He has all the things that we thought were bad about him. He hasn't shown. But the speed has been there. There's only about 5 quarterbacks that can make the throw that Baker made. That throw was fun. And just knowing the situation, you're only up 6, trying to keep the clock running. You're trying not to give up a safety. There's just so many other things that if you do one thing wrong, and we're so used to, that's what happens with the Browns. When you miss the extra point, usually what is that? It comes back to haunt you, right?
Lose by 1.
You get a big penalty, and you get a big penalty, and you extend the drive for the opposing team. They go down and drive, and you can't come back from it. I don't know if it's Greg. I don't know if it's Baker. I don't know if it's just the confidence of a young team and so many young guys that weren't here before. But that, to me, is bigger than winning. Winning is huge. But the attitude of overcoming the mistakes is one of the best things they got going right now, Zach. It's amazing because all of us are used to, oh, shit, they missed the extra point. We're going to lose by 1, right? We've all bought it. And that's no longer the case, and it's really cool to watch.
Yeah, I got a couple observations that I don't think have been out there enough. One is a strong opinion, and one is a thought going forward. Obviously the Browns have better players, and clearly the most exciting part is that your rookie quarterback is what you advertise him to be. He looks good. The rookie running back looks like he can be a monster. Denzel Ward, I don't know how healthy he is or isn't, but he might go to the Pro Bowl as a rookie when you looked at a guy that was probably a pick for 2 or 3 years down the road, right? Myles Garrett is going to have 15 sacks. There's a lot of excitement there. But the one thing I think that I know I haven't talked about enough, at least I feel like directly, is just Dre, having guys that have done it this seasoning. The plays that Darren Fells has made, right? TJ Carey going from getting benched and getting burned to making plays when you beat Julio Jones. There is so much to be said for having guys that have done it. And this team in the past was just too young, and you saw them melt at the first thing that went wrong, even in games they could win, right? Or even in games where they caught the other team sleeping for a quarter and a half, 2 quarters, something like that. Just having the guys that have been there. Nobody can cover Julio Jones one-on-one. We've seen that time and again. But TJ Carey in year 6 sure as shit has a better chance than some rookie from Louisiana Lafayette, right? And especially as they've had the things that they've had go on. To go back to our Freddie and Greg talk, if Tyrod, they botched this quarterback thing so badly in the summer. If Tyrod doesn't get hurt and the Jets win that game 31-3 like they were going to, then maybe Todd Haley's the interim coach of this team, right? I mean, the line is fine in this league, guys. So to everybody that says, well, if they'd have just gotten that yard against the Raiders, they'd legit be in the playoff mix. And you're right. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying this happened too, right?
Let me. Can I say something from that?
Yeah.
Can you hold your thought? I'm asking. I'm glad you brought that up because that's been on my mind for about 2 weeks now. In life, my dad taught me this a long time ago, and I'm sorry I'm bringing up my dad a lot, but I hung out with him and drank with him for 10 hours straight yesterday. and just our life is just he's a big part of my life. Your family's a big part of my life, and he's always stood with me and been there with me when I was. I didn't know where my career was going. I'm in a good place. I'll say this on the podcast. I don't say this very often. I got a new 3-year deal so if I don't get any felonies, as my lawyer told me, I'll have a good job and get. I got a contract extension, a couple of them over the last couple of days, and it made my dad tell me. He reminded me when I first got in and I was still delivering pizzas, and how pissed off I was when other people were getting jobs on the radio or other people were getting jobs that I wanted, and shit just worked a certain way for me, and it's worked out really well. I bring this up because I hear so many people talk about what Zach just brought up. And I've said it. Man, I was the one saying, and look, and I can admit when I was wrong. I was wrong, too. I was saying, hey, don't fire Hugh yet. It gets bad when you bring in an assistant coach. I'm so glad I'm wrong, and I'm so glad I'm seeing something that I haven't seen before when an assistant coach takes over. And I was saying, hey, they should have beat New Orleans. They should have beat Pittsburgh. Hell, they should have beat the Raiders. If a field goal kicker does this, an umpire doesn't screw you here. We can go down the list, right? And it's easy for us to say, man, if he wasn't doing this, I think everything has happened for a reason. Do I agree with you? And I think in life, everything happens for a reason, right? Like I've had friends that have gotten married, and as they were getting married, you're like, this ain't gonna work. But you gotta let them make that decision, not the other way around. Like you can't force people to be together, not be together. I think how everything has worked, and I know we want to get ahead of ourselves, and we want this team to be in the playoffs, and we want a playoff game down at the stadium, and we want to see Baker on prime time, which we'll get this week. I will bite my tongue and say everything that's happened has happened for a reason. They needed Hugh Jackson to be an idiot for as long as they needed, because they needed to get rid of both Hugh and they needed to get rid of Todd, right? They needed all of this. Because I go back to Gene Winters and I were just doing a show last week, and I go, hey, Gene, I interviewed Baker. I interviewed Baker right after he got drafted, and I was like, dude, you were the number one pick in the draft. What chip on your shoulder can you have now? And I remember Denzel Ward kind of laughed, and we were both laughing. And we're like, yeah, what's your, what are you going to hold against people now? You're the number one pick in the draft. And he was like, oh, don't worry, I'll find something. And lo and behold, he did. I just think all of this has happened for a reason, Zach, and I think we should just appreciate that we're here rather than changing the fortunes of the past.
Well, no doubt. I'm going to say that I understand the emotions when I read the comment section on The Athletic, when I read the tweets that I read, when I listen to Ken and Raj in the morning. I mean, the Browns have been so bad for so long, Dre. Like, I understand, to win as many games since Hugh got fired as they did in 3 years under Hugh, like, that's a real thing. To overreact to every win, I understand. You haven't won. You went a year without winning a single game. Right. And the year before that, you won one. Right. And it was on Christmas Eve, right? So, yeah, it is. I completely agree with your analogy and your line of thinking there. And that you're going somewhere. And the toughest steps are ahead for the Browns. But for the first time in a long time, and guys, whether you love us, hate us, secretly hate us, try to love us, whatever it is, we have kept it real with you guys on on our thoughts on the Cleveland Browns. And we haven't been 100% right, but we've been mostly right. And we haven't seen a lot of positive shit since the day we started doing this podcast in whatever form it was on.
No.
And right now, we don't see a Super Bowl team. But we sit here and can give you 5 or 6 reasons that it is finally trending up. Some of the things I think are closer to being really good than you think. Some of them I still have big questions on, and like I said, the toughest steps are still to come. But when you have the quarterback, when you have real GM picking players, and when you starting to mix guys with certain personality types and certain talent types and certain skill sets, and then the shit becomes contagious and all this excitement. Now, it's going to be a whole new ball game next year with 5 primetime games. It's going to be a whole new ball game with not sneaking up on anybody. But there are real positives going on at various levels of the Cleveland Browns organization, and there are real reasons to think that next year that this team should be in the playoffs.
You know how good it is? You're about to laugh at me. And my wife said this even. Because we had a really good day yesterday. Just, family together. It was fun to have my dad there. Just how everything went. And so last night, like after the Sunday night's game on, I still got 2 TVs playing because I'm an idiot. And she goes, so the Browns play next Saturday night? And I go, yeah. And I go, you want to get real crazy? Because, we've had people over for fights. We have people over for different stuff. She goes, should we invite everybody over to watch the Browns Saturday night? And I start laughing, and I go, oh, shit, Baker's made it. He just invited our house. And she looked at me, she goes, I can't believe it. She goes, but I think we should have people over for the Browns game next week. And I was like, absolutely. It's a Saturday night game. I go, whatever the hell's going on, we'll get food, we'll make food, have people over. This is going to be a good fucking time.
Yeah.
That's how I know the Browns have made it in my house finally.
No, hey, so yesterday I was talking before the game with my counterpart, the Panthers writer from The Athletic. And, we were just, BSing about the seasons, the covering, and the travel. And, I was giving him a couple recommendations to eat last night before he bailed out of town this morning. And he's like, let me tell you a story here. He's like, I'm sitting in, I forget what downtown hotel it was. He's like, but I was just eating breakfast this morning, kind of minding my own business. And he said there were a number of people in Browns gear that were clearly going to the game. And he goes, and there were a number of people clearly hungover from a wedding the night before. He goes, but these 2 guys beside me, neither one of them were from here, and neither one of them were here for the game. And the one of them was on his way back to the airport, and the one didn't fly out later. And he said, what are you going to do? And the guy said, well, I'm going to go to the game. And he said, well, I didn't even know you were a football fan, specifically a Browns fan. And he said the guy looked at the other guy and said, well, while I'm here in Cleveland, I'm going to make sure that I went and saw Baker Mayfield. And that, that's one guy's opinion. That's one conversation cherry picked through third-party channels. But that is what, in a quarterback-driven league, that is what's been waiting here since Bernie got cut 25 years ago, but since Bernie had it rolling 30 years ago. And we're in year 20 of the team being back. And with few exceptions, that hasn't been a conversation before. And we chuckle at Cleveland being the T-shirt capital of the world. I mean, what are people getting for Christmas? Well, damn it, everything that's got a 6 on it or Baker's caricature is going to sell like crazy. Yeah.
I'm just glad you didn't say the D word because I refuse to be a part of the dangerous talk. I think it's his thing, but it's corny and I don't know who did it, so I'm not talking shit about anybody because this is a positive podcast. It honestly is all about this, but let the players, like, if you want something to be cool, let the players let it be cool. It's not cool when the media is like, oh, did you wake up feeling dangerous today? Don't be that guy.
Yeah, let me give a thought on that, though. Let me give a thought on that. That, to me, is just like what I said when you consider the past and where it's – like, there's been nothing to build around. There's been no catchphrase because there's been no winning, right? So that – I just chalk that up as the overreaction to anything, the latching on.
I got you.
And we'll see. And listen, guys, again, bigger challenges lie ahead for every part of the organization. But when you just see the kids approach and you see, like Jarvis said, one thing I know about Baker, he walk it like he talk it. You see that come to life. And when you're a cynical old man like me and my friend that I'm talking to here, and you sit up there and you hear John Dorsey say, these are the things that drew us to Baker Mayfield. You respect that because you respect John Dorsey, but deep down you say, I don't know, we've heard this shit so many times before, right? And so it's 10 games in to his starting career, but it's been pretty damn impressive. Speaking of Cleveland T-shirts, we have the A to Z T-shirts, guys. I only have like one box. I think there's probably not even 15 of them left, so I can't say we have every size. But tweet me or email me if you do want those, and I'll get them shipped out to you because like I said, they're just sitting in a box. I gave Dre a few. We gave away some at the fundraiser for his wife a few weeks ago, so we'd love to get rid of them if you're interested. If they make a good Christmas present for somebody, I will go in and check and see what sizes we have left in there. Dre, I got about 6 minutes left, so gosh, what did I want to go get?
And the coolest thing about this conversation for me is I love where the NFL is at right now. Like the games yesterday, I know that it was like a 3-minute period of time when the Browns game ended and that Dolphins game ended.
Yeah.
Chiefs game was doing what the Chiefs game was doing. Zach, the other thing that's happened here, I'm finally at days where I'm like, man, you know what? Maybe I should go to the last game of the season. I haven't gone to a Browns game at home just to cover it or as a fan in a couple of years, as you know, and I bring that up here on the podcast. But as I'm saying that, going into halftime of the Browns game, at 4:15 yesterday, I'm like, why would I ever go to a stadium when I can have,
right?
It is not like I'm just saying, and it's not bragging in any way. And I hope, and I know there's people that are listening to the podcast that are like, hell yeah. Like my house was like, it was like my dad and I were losing our mind watching the end of that Patriots game. Watching, and I'll say this, I'm gonna be the first to say it. Kansas City's had his last big win. The injuries are mounting. Mahomes is just playing out. He may have won the MVP award yesterday, but the injuries and losing Hunt, you can just see the offense's explosion. It's just not the same. And why would it be when you keep losing? Because if Tyreek Hill is as hurt as he looked towards the end of that game, Sammy Watkins has been banged up, it seems, all season long, and now without Hunt, that truly was Mahomes carrying the team on his back. But it was phenomenal to watch. Also, they got some plays finally from their defense yesterday. I know it was against Baltimore. I'll say this too. I think, and you're going to laugh at me, I think Baltimore is going to win the AFC North.
Well, I know if they get in as the 6, or if you're right about that, I know nobody wants to play them when it counts. That's for sure.
Right.
That defense to have that showing in Kansas City.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes that game, but this is also the awesome part. That makes the Browns game versus them. It matters. But you know what I'd like? That's the other thing that's cool about this. You said this earlier. That Carolina game mattered to Carolina yesterday. Yeah. Like when they beat Atlanta, for as bad as Atlanta is and was, that game mattered. Like they're winning games against teams that are like, even though they're bad, even though their quarterbacks are messed up, they're beating teams that are trying to, like, it ain't teams that are rolling over. You know, like the Bengals game will be even though they played hard yesterday too. You could just I admit when I'm wrong. The Steelers thing is a very awkward situation. It seems like Ben is running, and I don't know. I'm not there. I'm a guy that's sitting on my couch having the time of his life. But when you see him, and I don't know if you know all the circumstances, and I've read a little bit today. When you see him doing the LeBron act, where it's like, oh, my knee, I'm gonna be out for 18 years, and then he limps back to the locker room and comes back out, and then they didn't put him right back in the game. You could tell Mike Tomlin and his teammates have kind of had it up to here with the prima donna act of every time you get hard, you got it so you can look like you're the hero. It just seems like the Steelers are like just running thin on each other's patience right now. Now that I may say that they may, knowing them, they may go out and win. They may win the Super Bowl now, but they didn't look like that and feel like that yesterday against the Oakland Raiders.
Well, and that makes 2 losses in a row, which is a rarity. And now all of a sudden they went from playing for a bye to, like you said, fighting to just to hold on to the division. Yeah.
Right.
You're right, but nothing solves things. Nothing solves things like a win, and they got New England coming to town, and they owe them 1 or 2 or 10. So we'll see. Yeah. I got 2 NFL thoughts as we get out of here. First, Patrick Mahomes in the let me tell you about my fantasy team department. That 4th down completion may or may not have saved a fantasy season. No one gives a shit about your fantasy team moving along. Gosh, I cannot wait to see where Patrick Mahomes' career goes. I really can't. My second thought, Bill Belichick. Okay, the Gronk thing, the Hail Mary thing. Well, first of all, poor Bill must have just frozen because he had 2 timeouts left. So what you do there is you call timeout when they come out to set up the play, and you realize that they're not going to throw the Hail Mary, and you get Gronk out. Secondly, you have Josh.
Wait. Dude, they were 70 yards away, Zach. Nobody
right.
They come on. He made a mistake.
Right. He made a mistake. No, I'm getting there. He made a mistake.
Okay.
Secondly, you have Josh Gordon on your team now, so he becomes your designated Hail Mary swatter and not your tight end, whose next stop is the old Yeller treatment, right?
Good point.
So
Good point. Yeah.
the reason I wanted to bring that whole thing up is that Bill is, by most accounts, the greatest coach of all time. And Sean McVay, who we've spent most of the year declaring the second greatest coach of all time, also did not have a great one on Sunday. It happens, guys.
Preach it.
It happens. And it is about there has not been a team in our lifetime, one team has come close to running the table, and we're fucking old. We tell you that every episode, right? It is about it is about weathering the storms. It is about parlaying a little luck with a little timing and a hot quarterback. And it is about just having guys around you that trust you and respect you and listen to you, and vice versa, and getting the right things in place as you go. Because Bill Belichick coaches shitty games, just like Hugh Jackson coached shitty games, just like Marvin Lewis coached shitty games, like Mike Tomlin coached shitty games, like Sean McVay coached shitty games, and we'll see what happens. With Greg Williams, again, my hat's off to him. I don't think that John Dorsey took this job 12 months and 2 days ago expecting to hire Greg Williams. I do think, given the circumstances that he stepped into here, it's totally different than taking over on a full-time basis. But I don't know, because the Browns, to me, right now, look like that they wouldn't be afraid of anyone. And if they do keep winning, there will be a level of decision. And we can talk about it, we can dance around it. I can't speak for John Dorsey or for Greg Williams. I will say this: one thing that could come into play is Greg gets the interview right. And he might have to. I'm not saying he would do this as a tactic with his strong personality, but he might have to say, Mr. Dorsey, if you're going to hire me, you need to hire me, because otherwise I'm going to go to X place.
I got 15 offers.
Yeah, well, right. Right. But you noticed, right, and there's a deeper psychology involved in this. You notice that was at his first press conference, and this entertaining egomaniac has been a completely different guy since then.
That's
completely different.
That's why I appreciate him, because he's showing that there's more to him than that guy that talked too much and said crazy stuff. He's shown maturity. I mean, lo and behold, let's old fuckers tell him people can grow, people can change. Now, we know that's in them, and don't get me wrong, players love playing for it. Players love playing for crazy, especially defensive players. They love playing for crazy mofos.
Yes.
They do. You want somebody crazy. You need somebody a little crazy to ask you to go run into a 300-pound lineman, right? You need it. Let me say this. I'm glad you brought up the coaches, and I'll be quick. And we have to be careful of this. I know in our job and when we do these podcasts, it's easier to be the first. It's easier to be the slickest. I got to talk Cowboys for a second. I don't know how good or bad Garrett is as a coach. And I know that we made the Philadelphia Eagles coach the best coach ever after they won the bowl last year, right? But I know when that Amari Cooper trade was made, I heard Jerry Jones get slandered from East Coast to West Coast. And Jerry Jones deserves to get slandered from East Coast to West Coast periodically once a month for the stuff that he says out of his mouth and stuff he does. But I said to you and I said to my dad, and I may have said it on a podcast, but I know I said to you, or maybe I texted it. I was like, knowing the draft history of Dallas and how Dallas works, I'd rather give up a first-rounder in 2019 for Cooper than to watch Jones try to find the next Cooper. I said something to that in results, right? Yeah. Remember that? I was like, knowing how Dallas drafts, I would rather them just take Amari Cooper and say, screw the first-round pick. And my dad looked at me yesterday. He goes, God, I hate when you're right. After Cooper's second touchdown, he goes, there ain't nobody in the draft that Jones would find that would do what they've done to that Dallas. Dallas' season totally turned around. And Dak Prescott still, to me, is a average quarterback at best. But having that threat and keeping that safety out of the box has changed the Dallas Cowboys this season. And they're drafting up those young linebackers, one white, one that couldn't walk and had dead foot up until 8 months ago. The Cowboys are going to be a bitch to play in the playoffs as well. It's just things can change. You get the right players in the right system at the right time. But I bite my tongue. The Jones family has put together a fun team to watch down in Dallas right now.
I'm glad you said that, because that leads to my closing thought. And this is for the fan in Section 322, for the guy on Twitter, for Pete in Painesville, for a fat kid in Akron sitting in front of the microphone. In Week 4, we thought the Cowboys were going to be a top 5 drafting team, right? In Week 8, when Hugh got fired, we thought Jason Garrett was next. Now they're going to the playoffs, right? So what do we know? Not shit. We watch the games. We
Right.
have fun with it, right? We do. We have fun doing this. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate you sharing and all those things, especially in December. It's a good time when you actually have to get out to your Christmas work party and do some human interaction. Spread the word about A to Z. The Cleveland Scene, to Honeymoon Grill, to American Fireworks, and to everyone listening, thank you. Facebook.com/A to Z podcast if you haven't clicked like already. A to Z podcast.com. To my mom and dad listening, driving, we appreciate you listening too. For Andre, I'm Zach. We'll talk to you in a couple days.
Konnichiwa, Cam's shoulder.